Hello and welcome to episode 133 of The Imperial Truth. I'm your host, Greg, and before we go anywhere, let's talk about our sponsors. So we have Element Games. For those who were looking for a new box of Indomitus, I will say, I have to be honest, even with my sponsors here, even though obviously they pay for a bit of the show, they didn't do a discount on the Indomitus box. I also believe they didn't do one on Sisters of Battle box. I believe it was, or it might have been Lumineth. They weren't the only shop to do this. There were a surprising number, actually, of larger retail outlets who didn't offer any discount. Now, I don't necessarily have an issue with that. They didn't announce it beforehand, which was the most frustrating thing. So I do have to caveat right at the start that if, my link, people were relying on my link to go and get that box and thought they were going to be getting it at discount, so did I. I think there was a little bit, I'd say, some pre-warning of that, so you didn't have to then scrabble around trying to find a copy that was still in stock somewhere. Would have been the best way to go. I was purchasing one for my brother-in-law, actually, and didn't want to, I wanted to look for one that was slightly cheaper. Didn't necessarily have an issue with paying full price, but if there are cheaper ones, why not? I don't play at Element Games, so there's that little bit of it's not my friendly local gaming store because they're not very local to me. I've got a feeling that with big releases like something like a new edition down the line, that we're going to see similar from the big shops again. So I just wanted to put that out there right at the start that if you're looking at something like that where we know there's going to be a massive demand, there might not be the discount there for you. And apologies if my link sent you that way. I do know that Element have had, I think their manager moved on, their store manager, and it has highlighted some issues they've got with their systems that obviously a really good manager was managing to kind of get round, as it were. And with COVID going on and everything else, that also disrupts kind of service normally. So there have been a couple of issues recently where I've heard people talk about maybe delays in emails, things like that. From what I understand, talking to someone who has already talked to one of the owners who I know has said, that there's a bit of a change going on up at Element. But, aside from the big release, they do offer 20% off on pre-release week for GW and 15% off generally. And you've got your Element crystals, which then go as store credit, which you can save up. And if you enter the crystal code of someone else when you check out, then you double up your crystals as well. So it's a small percentage, but it all goes back into being able to buy you more toys at the end of the day. So if you use them regularly, it does add up. And it looks like GW have hinted that we might be getting the Riser book for Adeptus Titanicus. So we could be getting some more tiny knights or Titan bits coming out, so there might be some heresy that we can look at buying in the near future. So that's Element Games. If you want the links or indeed my Element crystal code, then they are in the show notes. Or you can go to theimperialtruth.com and click on the banner, and that serves as a link. One thing with these links as well is you need to click it and then go through your whole purchasing from that link. I think if you refresh it, it tends not to work. But thank you for anyone who makes the effort to do that. It truly is appreciated. We also have Geek Shield, and they offer life insurance. And if you go and find them on Facebook and send them a message, you will talk to Pete, and Pete will ask you loads of questions and try and find an insurance that works for you, even if you've got insurance. He will, discuss it and see if it is working for you, if it's actually what you're going to be getting what you pay for, and that what you're paying for is suitable for your needs as well. What they do then is, if you do get your insurance through them, you get some gift vouchers back, and you can use them to spend on toys, which is just about perfect, really, isn't it? So, yeah, you can check out Geek Shield. They're also running a competition on Instagram. So if you're on Instagram, go and look up Geek Shield, and they have an Indomitus picture in the Indomitus box in front of it, and you can win one. And you have to like and share and the usual kind of things you have to do. But that's quite a good prize. There's some really cool models in that Indomitus box. So you can go and check out Geek Shield as well, and you'll hear the advert as we go through the show. But moving on to Heresy news, basically there is none. We've had Road to Thramas. Well, first off, I should say thank you for bearing with me. This episode is super late. I knew I was going to be missing my deadline that I was hoping for, so I thought, stuff it, I can wait an extra day or two for Road to Thramas to come out, hoping for some juicy info. Unfortunately, on that Monday, I started to feel pretty ill, and I ended up with a fever, and I ended up with cellulitis, and that basically knocked me out for quite a while, and then I was doing other stuff, and we've got loads of the two houses next to me are doing work on their house, and then my wife's actually doing stuff outside as well, which I couldn't help with, because couldn't stand on my feet for too long, and even now, almost a week and a half later, my foot is killing me, but cellulitis is pretty bad, so the fact that I'm standing here and been at work and working on it is a good thing. So just a good reminder there for people. Go and check things out, because I don't know if anyone's had cellulitis, but if you don't catch it quick and it gets in the blood, it can be it can kill people. So thankfully, as I touch wood, went to the doctors and got ahead of it early. So thank you for the kind words for that, and apologies for the delay. But it was in part down to sickness. But as I say, we did get a Road to Thramas article. Now, it does look like we'll be getting a few of these, which means it looks like 40k new releases kind of blocking off a period of time, so we won't get a black book whilst this is all going on, which is unfortunate but understandable. Games Workshop don't want to limit kind of how much money can be spent on different things like that. They want the focus to be on 40k. They also, Forge World isn't up and running properly yet in terms of it's quite an intensive process for getting the models out. I mean, Games Workshop's struggling on a lot of the plastics as well, because of social distancing, meaning less people in the moulding and everything like that. So Forge World, it can't open fully and then have this huge demand, which then takes weeks and weeks, because that will pee people off. So I think that's an element of it as well. So it looks like we're getting a few more Road to Thramas articles. Unfortunately, it wasn't particularly loaded with information. What we did get is a lovely map basically showing the galaxy at war and showing the Imperial held bits and the traitor held bits. Yeah, all the usual planets on there and stuff. Thramas being out on the Galactic East, I think, in the domain of the Night Haunter. But we've got Horus's Dark Empire, which is around Isfahan, where he slowly built his forces to really come towards Terra. We got Colchis down the side. We got the Realm of the Reaper, the Galactic Southwest, where Mortarion is from, obviously. And little nice little tips like Xander right at the Galactic Northwest there. But it's a pretty map. It looks like it's come straight from the next book, which is really cool. A little bit of writing in here, just confirmation we're getting a brand new army list for the Dark Angels and an updated list for the Night Lords. So we're getting the rules we've seen for the units we've seen, and then just some pretty pictures of some tanks, some colour plates taken again presumably from book 9. Not a lot in it, but bearing in mind people were screaming out for any kind of information, it is what it is at the end of the day. I think we would have seen the book by now had things not have gone the way they've gone, and now we are going that little bit further. There's the question of how much information do you put out? Maybe a little bit more. I don't know. If they put all the rules out like in articles, then some people won't buy the book. Maybe that's the thought process for them. those articles, how much of the background can they put in and really make it worth reading? Maybe a little bit more than they are. Maybe we will see some bits come up. I don't know. But as I say, it looks like we've got a few more Road to Thramas articles. Once the book's released, what we're probably going to see is that the Road to Thramas section stop, but a new monthly heresy section, and it'll move to the first Tuesday of the month, in line with the other, with the Necromunda and the Titanicus and the Aeronautica articles that they do, which are on the second, third, and fourth or last Tuesdays of the month. So we'll probably see something like that. It's frustrating. We all want new toys to play with. I completely understand that. But unfortunately, by nature of Forge World and what it is, it's always going to play second fiddle to the Plastic Rangers and 40k and Age of Sigmar are making lots and lots and lots of money. Which means I think what could be a little bit frustrating is we then do see some Titanicus stuff because they've got plastics to release and things like that, and it won't be quite the same it won't be the same intensity to get that stuff out. So we just got to hold tight. It will come round. We had a few good months. I think it wasn't an electric pace, but we have certainly had more content in the few months building up to the stop than we did the year before. So hopefully they had planned releases and those will come out straight afterwards, and we'll be back on getting some heresy done. But I know a lot of people have made the opportunity to go and catch up with their models that they've already got painted, and I certainly don't need to buy anything. Although, when has the need to buy something ever really been a major driving factor in buying it? Hey, it's when it looks pretty, you want it. In terms of what we're going to talk about on this show, again, like I've been saying this every week now, I've been kind of expecting things to get better. We've got an extra person back at work, but I've now been pulled back into doing the work for a number of branches, and just by the time I get home, like last Friday, whenever it was, just fell asleep, basically, just absolutely drained, shattered. So it's hard to keep on top of trying to get everything done. Timing slip. You don't want to, when you come home and you're that tired, you don't really want to organise meeting up with someone to record when you could just be doing things like that are a bit more relaxing in terms of just putting your feet up, not having to be near a computer, that kind of stuff. We do have a Sons of Heresy episode kind of waiting in the wings. Unfortunately, the person that we're doing it with is even more busy than me with work, so they're just crushed. So we are waiting just to record a Legion overview, and I will start working on the next one after that. I want to get back on with them because I've been particularly lax with those over the last year or so. I know that, so we'll end up revisiting ones before we do them all, I'm sure. So we're waiting for that to happen. We have now got Saturnine been released, so I am starting to work my way through on my first listen of that, having read the book. If you haven't gone and pick it up, it's on Audible. If you haven't used Audible, then you can get a free book. You can get a free trial. Can I suggest you go to the Edge of Empire page for their podcast? They have an Audible link, so you can go there and use their link, and they'll get a little bit of a cup of coffee or whatever it is for you signing up. But you can get a free book. You can get Saturnine for free. It is fantastic. In my opinion, it is the best 40k novel Black Library have. It's the best Black Library novel. We'll see if I still think that at the end of the listen through, but we are going to get Michael on to do a discussion of that, spoilered discussion of that at some point soon. Whether it happens next episode or the episode after, we'll have to talk and see if we can get schedules arranged and make sure I can listen to it in time. But what we've got for this episode is I wanted to do, partly with After Eleanor going, and partly because it's something I wanted to do on the show. Don't have time. Michael doesn't have time to do it. I want to dive into books a little bit more. So I got Marc Collins on. Now, Marc is an author for GW. He does a day job, but has some stuff published. and you can go and check him out on the Black Library page and find out the stories he's written. And we got him on to talk about the First Heretic because, it's one of those books I hadn't read in a long time. We talk a little bit about it in the discussion. And it's a book which is held up for a number of reasons. It's referenced a lot. And I went back and listened to my interview with John and ADB. That was quite a while ago now. And felt that actually it'll be interesting to go and revisit First Heretic. So got Marc on and we go through it. Please tell me what you think of it, because it's the first time I've done this with Marc. It's the first time I've done this in this style for a while. I'm by no means an organised kind of teachery person who can lay their stuff out. And I'm, when I did After Eleanor with David's an English teacher. He can break things down well. I'm just a dude who talks too much. So let us know how you think it went, what you think we missed as well, whether you think we're right or wrong, or what improvements you think could be made to that, because I do want to know. So, but there is no real main topic. There was one thing I had. I had someone contacted me and I've had this a little bit recently. Actually, I think I've talked about it on the show. I've seen quite a few people talk about getting into heresy for the first time, and it's quite interesting because if you go on to Crusade and Heresy or various other heresy hotspots online, which are very contained, I see a lot of negativity about the way Forge World do things and the fact that heresy is not dying but is losing momentum and things like that. And I don't always think those comments take in mind exactly how much COVID has affected things. But I also still, through all of that, I see some people talking about heresy and getting into it. And these are usually off the back of seeing an article on Warhammer Community or on Facebook from Forge World, or seeing some models or something that's been made by the community. And in this instance, I believe that the Return to Isfahan hashtag, that what has come up and been a bit quieter than on my feed, certainly, maybe I'm not looking in the right places, has inspired a few people to take a look at heresy. And I've had a couple of those people come and say, right, so heresy, what would I be looking at? That kind of thing. I think this is an area where we now, as I say, as a community, we need to be very encouraging. And I don't think the heresy community is always a welcoming place online. Now, that isn't to say I don't think it's, there are lots of nice people in it. There are. I think there's an evaluated opinion of the overall heresy community in how wonderful it is. I think for all that I hear, it's the best wargaming community out there. I think there are a number that seem to be far-reaching ahead of it. Something like the Middle Earth community, which I'm on the very outskirts of, seems to be extremely good at taking in people who are unsure of the law, the terminology, who just sometimes ask those stupid questions that noobs ask, because it's not a stupid question when you don't know. So I do think that we kind of have to work a little bit harder there. And sometimes that means that I'm bad at this. I ignore those noob questions sometimes because I'm doing something else and I'm not very good at answering them and I don't always read them right. But actually just taking the time out to not be sarcastic and actually say, yes, you can do this. No, you can't do that. This is what this is. That's what that rule is. Can be a real boost to someone getting into the game. What I had from this person was an email saying, basically, if I'm going to collect a legion, what one do I get? I've got these 3 legions. Tell me about them. And it was really was a really interesting thing to sit and talk about. So I don't generally like telling people what to take. And that's not always useful for the person who's asking me the question either. Sometimes you need that little bit of a push. But my question was basically they like Blood Angels, Ultramarines, and Dark Angels. What's the state of heresy? How does it play? What's going on? Which was a really interesting thing to actually sit and think about in context of trying to tell someone what to expect when getting into the game, where some pitfalls are, where some, in terms of not being able to compete even in friendly games, because no one likes to just be rolled over, but also where are some obvious things that noobs do that jump out at you, but actually for the good of your gaming might not be the best things to do. So things like covering the fact that your infantry is going to die. Like anything with a 3+ armor save is dead. It just, like, they don't last. And that's not necessarily a problem. You can still use 3+ infantry, but you have to look at other ways of making them survive, whether it's use of cover and special rules that grant cover. So obviously things like Night Lords can get away with a certain amount because you're going to be sitting there in the shadows and the Raven Guard do to a certain extent as well, that you can make the most of those rules, or things like apothecaries helping out to the survivability, or even just numbers. So something like the World Eaters encompass those too, where you can run squads across the board with apothecaries in and large numbers in, and you can get there and still have enough to do damage, that kind of thing. The nature of the fact that you probably have to deal with a Spartan, or you have to be prepared to deal with a Spartan, which is something fundamental that, particularly from 40k now, you're not going to understand as much because because of wound values, and that even then people who played 40k in older editions probably didn't play with a Spartan. Once you get to effective armor 15 on the front with the flare shield, then you have to think around a problem rather than necessarily straight through it. Things like the Primarch with a bodyguard unit and the limitations it has, and this is one of those things where actually I think you have to be as much aware of people taking it as being aware of maybe not taking it yourself, in terms of that doesn't mean you shouldn't take it, but you've got to be aware of the issues that it causes. And super heavies, as a prime example, is one of my favourite things. But there we go. It is what it is. In terms of the other thing, so we have these 3 legions that he's talked about. We have Blood Angels, Ultramarines, and Dark Angels. So for Dark Angels, unfortunately, at the moment, we don't really know a lot, because a lot could change. However, what we do know is we've seen Interemptors having strength 4 plasma that won't get hot, and they ignore cover with loads of shots, right? You don't want to charge Interemptors. We've seen the Companions with their funky rules. So we've got a sort of idea that they're going to have technology that isn't available to other legions, and they're going to have some of these nightly rules, and they're going to have, because they're talking about having the hexagram, and so we're going to have like 6 ways to play them as well. Maybe they've got more rights of war that feed into that, but they've certainly got a lot going on. But we don't know too much in terms of what's going on there, although they could work really well as a low model army with some funky vehicles, and even if they're not tanks, even if they're dreads, things like that. So yeah, it's hard to tell anyone to start Dark Angels now in those terms, apart from the fact the models are freaking amazing. I think they benefit, in a way, they benefit from being one of the last, in terms of they've really got some stunning stuff going on. Blood Angels. Talking about rights of wars, actually, that was another thing to bring up earlier on. Some of the rights of wars do create very binary games. So Day of Revelation can do that if you go full into it and things like that. But it's also remembering that just because you don't take a rite of war, just because you take a rite of war, you don't have to go fully into it. You can play around with it. And I should probably say at this point, I was talking to him as I said, what kind of units do you want as well? Because I think that's a fundamental part of the game, is looking at how to play. Like the stuff that you want to use and then making it work, because again you can just take stuff you like but it doesn't necessarily mean it will work. And this person was not necessarily set on taking big vehicles, should I say. A Rhino chassis-esque is about where he wants to be, and I pushed that a little bit and I'm like, well, you can fit Sakarans in and they can do a job without necessarily being that big tank. You like dreadnoughts? Well, cool. 30k's got dreadnoughts. It's got plenty of them. Jump pack troops, yep, okay. So we're looking at something like the Blood Angels there. We've got different options for that, which can all be played with and all be made to work. One other thing he pointed out actually was characters. So when you break that down, then look at the Blood Angels, say, actually, 2 to 3 assault squads in the Day of Revelation can work really well, but you don't have to go full on, like, everything else, deep striking in on top of the enemy as well, which, as I say, mitigates that kind of all or nothing approach, because the negatives are quite light for Day of Revelation. So your compulsory troops have to be assault units, and your compulsory HQ needs a jump pack. But Blood Angels want that. Anyway, they want a character getting up in the grill, but they can use their fast attack slots really well as well. And when you don't put Sanguinius into that, then it changes the list up a lot. A lot of the scariness of Day of Revelation is when Sanguinius is coming down and people are like, how do I do that? How do I do that? So there's the ability to maybe have a portion of your army deep striking, and then having the rest of your army working within that in terms of having characters and psychers, like Blood Angels love a psyker. So there we go. You can bring some really cool characterization into that. Assault cannons are groovy. If you're not going to have, one of the problems I think with not wanting a huge amount of tanks is sometimes where you find the best anti-tank weaponry is on a tank. Now, if your tanks are all light, then you're going to lose out that tank shooting war. If you're dreadnoughts, then there's potential for you to lose that out a little bit as well. So you just have to be aware that anytime you're building a list, you have to make up for those kind of things. And assault cannons can really make up for that, because they're so versatile in what they can use, and particularly in a Blood Angels list where you can put them on very quick things. So you've got great options for that kind of stuff. Ultramarines. You could do anything with Ultramarines. That's like part of their real charm, isn't it? Like they are the all-rounders, solid guys who actually, they do some things very well in terms of working units, interlocking, working together. For me personally, they don't stand out because they don't stand out, if you get what I mean. So I think you've got to love Ultramarines to really want to do them anyway. But they do have Suzerain, which are fantastic models and great rules-wise. Again, getting them there when you don't want a huge amount of tanks can be an issue. And then you've got Fulmintaris Terminators, which can be expensive but can be a lot of fun to use. And one of the things that this did was I sat down and thought quite a while on it. Made me come up with some different kind of lists that I thought were actually quite fun. So something like the Blood Angels, I ended up kind of thinking of something like a Day of Revelation force, so three 15-man assault squads, say, something like that. Unit of Angel Tiers with assault cannons, because they're awesome. Champion or a Chaplain, or maybe both, with jump packs. A couple of Apothecaries, because again, your armor's not going to be great. You've got a Javelin or two, because again, you're getting around the side. So when you're talking about things like Spartans, you've got the maneuverability to really keep them on their toes, but also just to get up in the grill and cause some problems. And that still leaves kind of space open there to play around for your second wave. things like Mortis Contemptor Dreads. A distraction Leviathan's never a bad thing. I think one thing is if you are dropping in and you're not dropping in fully hard core, like again with Sanguinius and all that, then dropping in one Leviathan isn't the same as dropping in one when you've got two and Sanguinius. If you drop one Leviathan in, I think that's understandable and would be seen as acceptable by most people. And then you could have some some veterans or something like that that can be in rhinos to zoom up in a second wave or outflank. So you could have techs or support attack squads or support squads to do that as well. And Blood Angels, as I say, love Moritats and Librarians. So if you have a champion or a chaplain, maybe a chaplain, then you can maybe dive into having a Moritat and a Librarian, something like that. And I think you've got quite a fun list there that maybe not be hard as nails, but I think would provide a sort of old school kind of feel to it, but also play into the Blood Angels and also give you a lot of different options for playing your game as well. And a lot of this as well depends if the person has a gaming group. And I know this person and the kind of people they play against won't be bringing out like the full-on hardcore lists because they don't play that way. So something like that could be a nice challenge. With Ultras, my temptation was a Pride of the Legion, so we can have some scoring vets, and then having a couple of attack squads still in there, partly just providing that first shot shooting attacks as well for your bonuses. Vet squads to suit needs. The beauty of vet squads and support squads is they can do different things. So if you don't have much anti-tank, you can go Combi Melta or Combi Plaz for Terminators or anything that's not a tank, isn't it really? And then support squads that can do similar. Javelins are cool always, but maybe for the Ultras here, something like a heavy support squad with las cannons, meaning that you then don't need your vets to have the multi-melters, those kind of things. But there's nothing wrong with a heavy support squad and maybe Foreman Terrorists either side of them, giving yourself a real solid basis to go from. Dreads to fill in the gaps and some rapier batteries to fill in the gaps as well. Depending on what you've taken, your rapiers can be made to fit in with the rest of the army. And a few rhinos again for your squads. And again, you've got an army there that's you still might have that weakness against the real tough armor. You might have a weakness against flyer. Maybe that's where you look at a Deredeo or two in those units. As say, there's a lot to play around with dreadnoughts. There's so many different types of dreadnoughts that if you like them all, you can utilize them to fill gaps for reasonable costs as well for dreadnoughts. Maybe it's a bit bland, but then maybe that's just the way I view Ultras. I don't know. And with Dark Angels, who knows? But they're going to look like it. They're going to look good. I kind of went through a few other things with him as well. Things like just pointing out what's good in Age of Darkness. What units are good? Javelins, Contemptor Mortis, Leviathans. Sikaran Arcus, I know some people don't rate them quite so much, but they're a great all-round threat. Whirlwind Scorpius destroys infantry for fun. If you are going lighter with your anti-tank, then something like a Sikaran Venator can be a nice option just to shut something down. So if they do have a super heavy, you've got that attempt. It might not always work, but when it does, it becomes really valuable. Of course, it then gets a big target put on it, but that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? And something like Plasma Support Squad that are just going to terrify any Terminators, any infantry squad that's put in front of them. And you know what? They're also going to hit through on some lighter vehicles as well. So they provide a nice kind of balance in things. There's a lot... So you might be able to see from that, I struggle to kind of tell anyone particularly what to take. I felt there was a a nice mix there. What was interesting is immediately he then came back to me and said, "What about Death Guard and Iron Hands?" And all of a sudden you're like, okay. So having a look at Death Guard, I would actually think what's really nice looking at something like this with this kind of view of what units are liked and style of play means things like, I actually didn't look at many Rites of War because of the nature of Rites of War leaning one, not all the time, but generally leaning one way. And I found that a lot of the time there weren't a huge amount that really jumped out at me hugely. Death Guard, obviously, the reaping can be really useful moving through cover, particularly when you've got a lot of infantry is very good. But again, looking at those things that make the armies good, something with, say, Death Guard was, I hadn't mentioned the Vindicator at any point. The Vindicator's a cracking tank, and I think is starting to get used a bit more now. The standard Vindicator, this is. But for quite a while was just kind of overlooked. But actually, in something like a Death Guard army, it really fits and can put down a lot of, it's a 24-inch range of don't go there because I'm going to splatter you. Maybe not so great against tanks in terms of only having one hit. But again, you don't want a bunch of Terminators, bunched up, as it were, underneath one of them, because you're gonna be hurting on that one. The only real problem I find with the Death Guard is the lack of unique units. It really feels like they could do with something new. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Grave Wardens are wonderful. Death Shroud, they're cool. You've got to get them into combat is the problem. But yeah, and Iron Hands, I went through Iron Hands as well. And Iron Hands is one. It's a bit funny. Although there are some cool lists you can do, you tend to see a lot of tanks and a lot of healing of tanks. I've shied away from doing kind of list reviews on the show because when someone says what should I take, as I said at the start, I think take what you want. Like, I play Space Wolves, cool. Well, Space Wolves can still stand back and shoot stuff. They're Space Marines. Like, every Legion can do everything almost. But I think when there's a kind of defined kind of parameters around what to do and then a short list of legions, I think can be quite fun to go and look at other stuff. Didn't make me want to go and make any of those armies, which is the key. Obviously, whenever you look at a new army, you want to do that. But I do think there is we can get kind of caught up into not just like the prime examples of how to play armies, so Death Guard, the Reaping, running 100 million World Eaters across the board at someone, all those classic tropes that are really cool and really fun, and sometimes are what attract people to the army. But I think there's a really nice kind of there's a nice kind of genesis of ideas you get when you're restricted by parameters of what people want to use or don't want to use. It focuses the mind almost, and maybe that's something that, when you go to an event, that maybe you might think about for yourself. Like, I'm one of those people that ended up using similar-ish. My Mechanicum changed up, but that core of it stayed roughly the same for quite a while because it was fairly useful. It was good. It could do various things, and I just flavoured around that. And part of that was lack of painting more models. That's always a fun part of it. But when we go to, if you go to your fourth event of the year and you're using pretty much the same army and you've got other models to pull in, I think it's a nice challenge to yourself, but also when someone comes in from the outside, what this kind of taught me a little bit was like, okay, what do you like the look of? Because, people are going to want to paint the armies they're painting. And there's always, again, you can't tell anyone what Legion to play. I just don't think you can. We can, but at the end of the day, if they've got to make a decision that they're going to stick with, unless they've got lots of money and can paint really quick, that's fine. finding out what that person wants to use. Now, there are times where they're like, I want to use this with this, and you might have to say, right, okay, in this instance, these are the benefits you're going to get, very minimal, and these are the reasons why maybe you wouldn't look at doing it. Lay them all out. It's still the person's choice, but I don't think there's a huge amount of occasions where you will get that. But those restrictions then, when you sit and kind of try and play with an army, mean you suddenly get there's much more variety in what you're doing as well. And obviously everyone's got play styles that they're going to fit into. So it's not, or preferred play styles that they're going to lean towards, should I say. You know, some people are going to run across the table no matter what army you put in front of them. They play dwarfs in Warhammer Fantasy. They'd still charge across the table. That's cool. That's fine. But I think there's almost a freedom in not just sitting down and list building with a theme in mind, but list building with those restrictions in place. Now, the hope is this person is going to be collecting one of these armies at some point. Notoriously slow at painting and collecting and procrastinating, so we'll see what that happens. But a challenge has been laid down for me to go and play once he has a force ready. So I might have to bug him and go from there. But it was a really nice exercise, actually. So I appreciate that this last 20 minutes of me talking here has been very rambly, very kind of almost stream of consciousness a little bit. But I suppose it was a bit of a kind of light bulb moment in terms of how I look at helping out people who want to get into the hobby. Also, a little bit of a different approach to how I look at just dealing with people asking me about lists. And maybe there is more room for that in the show. Please feel free to let me know what you think on that. It feels like it's been so long since we sit down with the books that sometimes I felt a little bit out of touch with the armies as well. So there is an element of getting into looking at different stuff. And one thing it did point out was how spread out some of these rules are. Like, I know they can only release books every so often and whatever, but with the releases that have come out that are online only, trying to find where all the rules are. If you're collecting Blood Angels and you want to make a list, you've got to have book 8, and then you've got to have the red book, and then actually if you want some of the newer stuff, you've got to go and get the PDFs from online, and you don't always know where to look. Let's hope once book 9 comes out we can have a bit of a tidy up of that, and hopefully that is something that's going to be worked on and get some new red books out. I think for that purpose, and then for having a basis to build off of moving forwards, or move slightly away from, however they want to do it, whether they're happy to do an Age of Darkness version 2 this early or whether they're prepared, I don't know. But yeah, it would be nice to get everything kind of collected together, even if it involves having more red books than we really want. It would be nice to have those kind of semi-complete, and we're never going to have it perfect, and we're never going to have it. We're never even going to have it to the level that Age of Sigmar has it per se, because of the nature of the way the models come out for Horus Heresy. Because we don't have specific armies, we don't have the World Eaters list coming out, and then all the stuff that they can use. So we have to be a little bit kind of aware of that. And again, this is where I think sometimes we have to say, oh yeah, by the way, that rule's there. Not, oh my god, here we go, here's the same question. No matter how hard it is, you know what, sometimes you have to just have that, say that out loud, and then calmly type answers onto Facebook. Because it's not always the fault of the person asking the question. Sometimes it is, but not always. So yeah, let me know if you want to do more kind of list stuff on the show, or you've got any ideas for it. Then please feel free to contact me. But my voice is already failing. This is all part of being run down from work and stuff like that as well. So I won't talk too much more here. We'll go into the discussion with Marc, and then there is a little bit of news at the end as well to go over. but I'll speak to you then.
What's a Geek Shield? Is it like a breacher shield?
Not exactly. Geek Shield is an insurance service giving you hobby rewards along the way. We appreciate that life insurance is a bore, so we wanted to make things a little more exciting with rewards that matter to you. Cool, right?
Okay, so why life insurance? I have feel no pain. Isn't that enough?
Very different thing. Life insurance can be used to settle off your mortgage, help with raising your children, or cover your funeral costs. It's never going to save you, but it will save your loved ones from financial disaster. Here's what some of our customers have to say.
Pete really will give his all to try and find a better policy for cheaper and give you vouchers. Why would you not do it?
It's great to know I have security for my family. Of that, I am certain.
Thanks to Geek Shield, my wife now questions if I'm still worth more alive.
Thanks to Geek Shield, I get to murder my family in the name of the dark gods and get all the money.
Yeah. So head over to geekshield.co.uk to book your free consultation today. Terms and conditions apply. Geek Shield is not a physical shield, nor will it save you from the primordial annihilator.
Well, I'd like to welcome Mr. Marc Collins to the show. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. You're more than welcome. Some of the listeners might recognise that name. You are a published Black Library author.
I am, yes, as of the last year and a bit.
Yeah, congrats on all that. We met at various weekenders over time. Probably, I suspect maybe even the first one.
Probably.
Although I wasn't really, I was kind of off by myself for most of that weekend. I definitely were you part of the group that had the chairs back then? The sofas? Was that you guys? Might not have been, I don't know. It's a long time ago now, isn't it?
It really is. No, the first weekender, I was one of the gold ticket people.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of where I met like a lot of my core friend group at the moment. So
Sure.
That was really transformative weekend, actually.
Yeah, that was quite an interesting thing, actually. I know a few people who went on that who all got quite a lot out of it. Did you ever do the platinum ticket when they did that one year?
No.
Exactly. I think that answer probably says it all. It was a little bit extreme. But we've got you on, not to talk about your own books just yet, but we're going to go and look at the First Heretic in a bit more of a deep dive than I do with Michael on the show. So first things first, spoilers, because we will be discussing it and its themes and everything else. I mean, I suspect a lot of people have heard it or read it or heard it or understand most of it by now. It's cool. When did it come out? Oh, it's got to be a few years ago now. But yeah, Aaron's...
I would say 11. No, wait. At least 12, I would say. I was still living at home, I think, when it came out.
Yeah, it's deceptively long time ago. Aaron's first full novel of the heresy. And one that a lot of people rate up there as one of their favourites as well. Where does it kind of sit with you?
It is definitely one of my favourites. I just remember sort of being the sort of momentum of the series had been going on. Before that, things were kind of moving forward. You were getting a lot more diverse narratives. And then you start reading the First Heretic and it's this deep dive into the word bearers. And it starts off so sort of out of sync with the timeline. And it takes you so far back and takes all that time to center itself. That was just like, this is incredible. I remember getting a very visceral reaction from it the first time I read it.
I do remember kind of absorbing it all that first time. And loving it on listening to, because I don't think I've read it again. I mean, I've little bits and pieces maybe that I've seen, and it's just kind of like sections. But yeah, kind of remembering, like the story was, it's so set apart from the rest of the heresy, isn't it? For 3/4 of it, it's very much its own tale in that. Although obviously centered so deeply in the reasons of the heresy, but yeah, it was a real look into the why of the word bearers and what they did and what happened from there. And one of the other things, we jump into it. It's a book often quoted, isn't it? For a lot of different things that happen, and sometimes I feel like this happens a lot anyway. Maybe in books a lot, but certainly in the 40k arena, that some of those quotes are often used liberally when maybe they have a tighter focus than a lot of people consider. But there are a lot of points of conjecture in this book, some of which have been born, as you pointed out to me later on, to be kind of have had been backed up. But there's a lot of stuff in this book which, taken at face value, is not necessarily the way to look at it. I think what I'm trying to say is there's one of the major features of the Horus Heresy and Black Library itself is 40k is the unreliable narrator, and I think this book has we have a number of different viewpoints, and all of them are very much targeted. They have a certain they have their prejudices involved in that all the way through. Yeah, so we've got Cyrene, who watched the Ultramarines come down and burn her city. We got Argel Tal, who is right in the middle of that, and then we basically got a demon. And I think you need to pause and think about who's talking almost every time you're reading an aspect of this. And actually, within the book itself as well, Argel Tal even points this out. Not just Argel Tal, actually. There's a few places where they're like, you were shown this by a demon. Kind of keep in mind who's telling you things.
Yeah, you really have to keep a lot of the context in mind with the book. And like you say, when things are quoted so liberally, sometimes they kind of file off the context and it is presented as gospel truth.
Yeah, and what Aaron's done well is what a lot of authors do well when they do that, when the person with all the power who's showing you the visions is telling you something, there are nuggets of truth in that as well that can be backed up and can be, or at least can be validated. So that it does add that little bit more into when something can't be validated, he was right here and here and here. So yeah, there's definitely more than almost every other book. I think this is a look at who's talking at any one time, and then make your judgment. Because I'm not saying that everything told to you while they're in the warp is a lie, but there are certain things there that don't ring true with me. And I suspect, you're always going to come out. Some people think Magnus did nothing wrong, so there are always going to be people who have a differing opinion.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the beautiful thing about a book like the First Heretic, is that people can go into it and come away with so many different outlooks and outcomes. And for a lot of people, it's the book that cements the villainy of the word bearers, and they'll never look at them the same again. And for other people, it makes them like these sympathetic, heroic figures who are struggling against the empire of lies. And I think that the way that the fandom reacts to that, the way that the different sort of faction preferences react to that, are always very interesting, because there's probably some Chaos players who also feel a bit perhaps misled or misguided, and that maybe puts things more into perspective in that regard, like who are your heroes on each side, and then it's like obviously how the fandom reacts to Erebus.
Yes, yeah. You're absolutely right there. I think there's a lot of kind of like foundation stones of people's thinkings within this book particularly, and I think that's something that Aaron loves to do, loves to get involved in those aspects of things, and I think we see that with Betrayer as well. I think Argel Tal himself reminds me a lot of Khan, in terms of he's in the middle of this legion and he's not necessarily buying everything that's happening, and he's desperately trying to do what he thinks is right through the whole thing. Where and that in itself can be judged either way, but he's like got his Primarch to one side and then everyone else to the other side, and he's trying to stay kind of objective through everything that's going on. How objective you can be at any one point when the world's crumbling around you is an interesting concept, but he's definitely even at the end of it, he's kind of justifying trying to stay true to who he is, and he believes the Legion is. But I think that's why so many people love him, to be fair.
Oh yeah, he's such a relatable character.
Yeah, and that's not easy to do when there's Space Marines involved, particularly Space Marines who are half demon, and have made some pretty tough decisions. So yeah, we've got these kind of viewpoints. What's actually interesting as well, we've even got Argyll Tal, we've got him talking to his Primarch, and we've got him talking to Cyrene, and then we've also got kind of his just views. So even with Argyll Tal, you've got slightly different kind of tones in the way he's talking as well, which is quite clever.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But yes, so the book's broken down. We've got essentially we've got three parts, and we got the humbling of the word bearers and their kind of reaction to it, and then we've got this quest for understanding, and then we've got this acceptance and a jump forwards to seeing what they've done with it. It's one of those things we knew. I'm trying to remember. It's been so long now that the Heresy's been out. I'm trying to remember what we knew before the books came out. We knew they'd been censored.
Yeah,
but
it's always just like a paragraph of, the word bearers were censored for their worship of the Emperor and then turned to chaos.
Yeah,
and it's just so simple a thing for such a huge concept.
Yeah, absolutely right, and it's hard to fill in those gaps. A bit like when Graham had to write False Gods, and we had to get Horus from his point of expanding the Imperium in the name of the Emperor to siding with the Chaos Gods. And there's criticism in False Gods that happened in too short a period of time. And here we've got like half a book to explore it. So I do think there is I'm not saying Graham was wrong to do it that way, because there were restrictions within that book. He had to tell a story as well around that. What you have got with this book is you've got time to explore it, which is, say probably like half the book is them coming to terms with what's happened. We've got so if we go back to that moment, we got the destruction of the Perfect City on Kerr. When people want to highlight the Emperor causing his own problems, this is prime example number 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Send your.
It's this or Angron.
Sorry, what was that?
It's this or Angron with the prime reasons number 1 or 2. It's always this or abandoning Angron, or making Angron abandon his fellows.
Yeah, and this is why you can have theories around the Emperor maybe not misplaying it, and maybe like it seems so obvious a mistake that you then start to wonder, is it a mistake? You don't have any background here that they'd been warned much beforehand. The word bearers at this point are the slowest legion in capturing cities, capturing planets, making them compliant, because they take so long, because they're not leaving that place until they are fully immersed in the Imperial cult. And that's not what the Emperor wants. The Emperor wants a quick conquest of the galaxy and no religion, thank you very much. And the word bearers just can't do it. It's not in their makeup, is it?
Not at that stage.
No.
And it's the same because, they are being so thorough and meticulous, and if it was a more secular compliance, if it was the the Ultramarines, for example, then, maybe it would be something that would be lauded that we're taking so long to, rebuild and putting all that effort in. But it's, they're doing the right thing for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're quarter ahead. We have Guilliman sent, and Guilliman's, I suppose, one of the prime examples of doing it for the right reason. And he's there to as an example. Whether you should ever raise someone's brother. Why don't you act more like your brother? I mean, that never goes well. All that will build his resentment. But we get to the point where we have not only Guilliman there, but Malcador as well, because, Lorgar's not prepared to accept this from his brother. So Malcador comes down and says, right, okay, well, I'm here, and I speak with a higher voice. So, yeah, this is how it is. And he strikes them both. Like, this is Lorgar just not understanding at all, showing the depth of kind of how into this he is and how alien it would be for him to have just created compliance, as you said, in the way you said.
But that's the thing. It's like it's such a strong reaction, and he's so open about it that you just wonder how it was ever allowed to get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
I remember some stuff in the Forge World Black Books, and it's all kind of, well, there was rumours, and then they would send people, and it started to come out, and it was talked about behind closed doors, and you just feel as though it would be. They're so open when you look at like the way that Monarchia was. They're not hiding it. It's prayer bells on the hour and all that thing. It's so in your face that how could any visiting Imperial not have seen it?
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, why didn't you send one of your brothers, one of his brothers in private to him? Like someone like Horus, sent there and gone, look, Lorgar, we know what you're doing. You just can't do it anymore. Right? You've got to step up. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. And then, if he's failing to comply, then send in this kind of humiliation that he suffers. What's interesting as well is, like, it took the word bearers 2 months to get to this planet as well. They suffered. Like, this planet really suffered. They were driven out of their houses, their cities, and just told, this is going to happen. So it's not like it happened immediately. So everything, not only are the word bearers getting this kind of this telling off, this slapping of a wrist, but they're coming to a planet and seeing like the punishment that's been handed out to someone else for their mistake. So that I don't think that ever really goes down well either. Yeah. So there is a definite I'm a bit of a fan of the theories that the Emperor knew what he was doing a lot of the time and had to take calculated risks and not even just calculated risks, but the possible theory of a planned heresy is something that I don't think is too far bubbling under the surface. So I these kind of things just feed into it. Like, how could you have got it so wrong?
Mm-hmm. It does always seem very calculated with some of them, that way of just sort of, the changeability of his emotions and sort of the way that he handles things. And, some of them obviously talk about having a very close relationship and having all these wonderful moments. And then sometimes it varies entirely within, that relationship. You get, Perturabo having that wonderful moment on the Tower of Astartes and being like, oh my God, this is fantastic. I'm being trusted so much. And then, the reality sets in.
Yeah.
And I think that with Lorgar, it's kind of especially galling because I feel like if he'd just been given a bit more trust and a bit more responsibility and kind of like shunted onto a path that was slightly more his speed, that everything could have went right. If he'd been sort of afforded a little more knowledge of the overall plan.
Yeah. So
I think it should have been him.
Yeah. So with Magnus, like, because the question for everyone says with Magnus, why didn't you just tell Magnus like about the warp? For Magnus, nothing would ever be enough, and he would always push those boundaries. I get the feeling with Lorgar, if you said to him, look, there's going to be 200 years of just playing it cool, right? Then after that, we're going to have this Webway project set up. We're going to be sorted. Then you can go and do what you need to do, but we need to get in place first before we can go out and do all this stuff. Then you get the feeling he could bide his time, and he would understand that certain things have to happen in a certain place or a certain time, and that would feed into what he does. But we're in a different position, and he was never given that opportunity. That's one way of looking at it. But yeah, that's the aspect where I've got a little bit of sympathy for the word bearers, but I only have a little bit, because I think once you've had Monarchia, once you've had the word bearers come back and try and process exactly what's happened, then I think you see a little bit of the real character of the Legion, in that you have Lorgar, Corferan, and Erebus talking, and it almost feels that they're turning their face away from the Emperor was inevitable. Lorgar feels like Lorgar needs to worship something. It's built into him, and it almost doesn't matter who, just as long as they're powerful. He needs that to validate himself. So he needs to validate having faith in something, as it were. Corferan and Erebus are interesting. So you said at the start, like everyone talks about Erebus. Everyone loves to hate Erebus. Erebus, this great architect of the heresy. And sure enough, we read in Horus Rising and other bits and pieces that Erebus is always there. He's always whispering. But at this point, what really I couldn't remember, and this I'm trying to remember exactly how this feeds into the to Lorgar's Primarch's book, but Corferan's the one there saying, well, I never believed the Emperor anyway. I never stopped worshipping the gods of Colchis. Which is, to have he still calls Lorgar's son at this point. And even later in the book, he's like, he was, the Emperor was never your father. I am your father. And to have someone of that importance next to even a Primarch who can see through a lot of stuff is quite a telling thing. And Erebus jumps on this. So what was interesting for me was Erebus. It's almost like Erebus could see the play for power here and was like, okay, I see where this is going. I'm going to put my money behind Corferan here. And at that point, he then jumps in. And I think it's fair to say that later on down the line, Erebus takes that position that much further. But you then it starts to colour my vision of Erebus through the whole thing. Like, Erebus's play here is just, like, it doesn't matter who it is, what it was, what the situation was, what the gods were, what the position was. He was in it because he knew that it would give him all the power.
The sort of like Corferan's meticulous, planned out, this was always going to happen, versus his sort of very opportunistic sort of slipping in, and then they both sort of progress down that same path.
Yeah. And it's not like Erebus is like I described him to as a bit of a chance. I wrote in here as a bit of a chancer. He's not a chancer. He's an opportunist, because once he makes that decision, boy, does he go jumping 2 feet into it. But through this book, Erebus he's helping write the Book of Lorgar. He's helping, when they come out of I can't remember the name of the Zaphon, the chaplain, when he comes out and he's like, oh yeah, we tried this and we found that this works better. Okay, Erebus is like, I'll amend the Book of Lorgar, and he's sitting there. He's like, it's all about power for Erebus, and I'm not too sure he cares much about anyone else in the Legion, even Lorgar to a point.
everyone just becomes a tool, really another rung in the ladder. I think sort of later books really help with that when they sort of like, codify Erebus's like personal philosophy. He's destiny's hand. He's the one that shapes things. He's like the god's chosen implement, and more powerful figures like Lorgar and maybe not Corforon, but Lorgar can come along and go, you're not really doing it right. You're not seeing the whole picture. You're being a little narrow-minded there.
Yeah, absolutely. Erebus has this. It's one of those little niggles I have, is that whenever anyone writes anything about like worst character or most heinous characters, they're all like, "Oh, screw Erebus! Erebus ruined it all." And I'm sitting there going, "Hold on." Like Corfaron's sitting somewhere going, "Flipping Erebus! He only did it because I mentioned it." Right? Corfaron never lost his faith right from the start.
No.
He was always there, and you do wonder with a different father figure for Lorgar. Although, as I say, the Lorgar Primarch book does put a slightly different twist on it. But you do wonder without Corfaron there how things might have gone. But yeah, it's always good. It's always really cool. So we have this destruction of the planet. We have Cyrene gathered up. I remember Cyrene. Remember her being cool. Remember everyone loving her. Like, she went through some hell. She went through 2 months of being in an occupied city by the Ultramarines, of watching it all destroyed around her, being blinded by the act of the city actually being destroyed, being left in the dirt, and then being picked up by these word bearers and put on a ship. Like, she's one tough cookie.
Oh, yeah.
She's one serious cookie. And then having to be the kind of the moral kind of, she essentially works as a priest, doesn't she, towards Argyle and others as well, to take on all that. She's a fantastic character. And actually, for a book to have a tool like her as well is very clever. I've got to give Aaron that. Very clever. She offers up a lot of opportunity for dialogue to happen that would be more tricky otherwise, which is really good. So at this point, the word bearers, they're left to look for another alternative. They feel like the Emperor can't be the answer to what they need, and they need to go and find the old gods. But they need to hide this, so they go off and they start to crusade the way that they were asked to from the start. And here we see word bearers get a bit of a bad rep in terms of being a legion.
Yeah, definitely.
But here we see them as a legion, like ruthless, outperforming almost everyone, and they rip through the galaxy.
I like that we kind of came back to the planet from Scions of the Storm from back in Age of Darkness. With all the lightning construct things.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's
and
little
you get
heartwork.
At war, and even the custodians are like, bloody hell.
Yeah, it's it's always nice, and I think Aaron's quite good at that as well. He's a guy who knows his lore very well, and pulls in from that. And we get to see them in full on battle mode. As you say, it's easy sometimes to only remember legions as the caricature of that legion. But you put 10 Space Marines on a planet, doesn't matter what armour their armour is painted, what colour their armour is painted, they're going to fight like Space Marines. And that's a scary, scary thing. What is interesting here is we get to see a Custodes in action. And here we get, we've seen the Custodes a little bit before, but here we get a real view of the what they are and how they fight. Which is fantastic, and again builds into that kind of mythos of them, and you go into the game and everything else, but they're almost alien to the Space Marines in the way they fight.
There's the oft-quoted line about we are wolves and they're lions.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some serious. What's interesting there is I think there's a little bit of arrogance in that as well, because the Space Marine's like, yeah, we get enough of them, we'll take them down, and it's like, yeah, if you get enough of you, you'll take them down. Enough's a word that can contain a wide, variable number of figures. there's some serious power there. And we get to see that later on a little bit as well. And here we start to, it's on this planet actually that we start to really see kind of how the Legion's forming. Lorgar does come down, but he's wearing robes. He's got Erebus and Corferan with him. Aquilon is wanting to hang around, and it takes a lot to move him on. But already you've got the chaplains themselves are meeting regularly, separate from the rest of the Legion. They're being a bit cautious about this, but they're setting up this kind of this structure that we're going to see moving forwards. And it's here that they announce that they're going to go back to, they're going to start the pilgrimage and they're going to go and meet Magnus. Just as Magnus walks in the house and starts looking at me. So yeah, here we've got that split. And when what's interesting for me really was I kind of forgot about the details of the conversation with Magnus when they get back to Colchis. But my word, is there some arrogance and some hypocrisy coming out of Magnus's mouth. We got one thing I do like is even at this point, Magnus just tells Lorgar off for whining. You get that feeling they generally do just look down a little bit on Lorgar out of all their brothers. It's like, come on, dude, get a grip.
And it's a shame it's meant to be like one of your closest brothers.
Yeah, but
this is the one you trust, and he's still like, dude, come on.
Yeah, when he's coming to him in such a broken manner, and it's like he's not sitting there crying or whatever, but he's desperate. Lorgar's desperately searching for some support and for some kind of help, and Magnus doesn't know that it's kind of as deep rooted maybe as it is, but yeah, he's kind of just told to buck up and get on with it, which is, I say, ironic because Magnus is telling Lorgar not to search too hard for a truth or to need a faith in anything. Well, if this was on the other foot, Magnus would leave no stone unturned.
Yep.
I mean, even if it wasn't on the other foot, Magnus leaves no stone unturned. But here,
listen to Dad, and it's like,
yeah, Magnus. If only you just accepted what came out of your father's mouth, how different the world would be. But then we actually see there's some justification for this that Lorgar didn't even know about. Like, Magnus was pulled into a meeting and they were talking about should the word bearers be treated as just like the 2nd and 11th legions, like should they be broken up because of their failures. So at this point you're like, well, why would you stay then? For that to come out, that must undermine absolutely everything you've got going on. And I don't
always surprised him. Russ is in favour of him, though.
Yes, to be fair. I'm trying to remember who it was now. I know the Space Wolves.
Horus, I think, was with him
Horus,
as well.
It was Mortarion as well. I'm trying to remember now. But yeah, I mean, there were. I think those are fair people as well. Like, for all the faults that people will lay at, like Russ's door, for instance, I think he was generally a fair person. Like, he had his issues with the Thousand Sons and their use of witchcraft, but he was open and honest about that. And Horus backing you up must give you a lot of a lot of comfort in that respect. But yeah, to be told, like, Yeah, we almost like disbanded the Legion and it erased you from the history of the Imperium. That's got to kick hard. There was
You think that would be sort of the point where, like, if being humbled to begin with doesn't send the message, then, by the way, there was a secret conference and we're maybe going to just wipe you all out.
Yeah.
If you didn't buck up.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Actually, I've got the quote. I actually pulled out a quote. So, Lorgar looked back over the city. As for Guilliman, you have no idea how fine it felt to strike him down. His arrogance is unbelievable. We are blessed with many brothers who would benefit from being humbled once in a while, Magnus smiled. But this is for another time. Speak what must be spoken. You are afraid. I am, Lorgar confessed. I fear the Emperor will break the word-bearers and break me. We would be cast alongside the brothers we no longer speak of. The silence was hardly comforting. Well, Lorgar asked. He might, the one-eyed giant said. There was talk of it before Monarchia. Did he come to you to ask your thoughts? He did, Magnus admitted. And he went to our brothers? I believe so. Don't ask what sides were taken by whom, for I do not know where most of them stood. Russ was with you, as was Horus. In fact, it was the first time the Wolf King and I have ever agreed on anything of import. Leman Russ spoke in my favour. Lorgar laughed. Truly we live in an age of marvels. Yeah, like, that was that point. So it was just those two that were named and Magnus. So, yeah, crazy. But at this point, Lorgar has basically said, screw it. He's come out to his brother and said, I'm looking for something else. And Magnus does nothing. For all of when people say Magnus did nothing wrong, when he thought there was a chance that Horus was turning, he did. He moved heaven and earth to tell the Emperor. He sacrificed 100-odd thralls to cast a spell to warn the Emperor. At this point when Lorgar's basically said, I'm searching for something else, there's no record that Magnus turned around and said, does anyone want to keep an eye on him? Like a proper eye on him. Not just 5 custodes. I think
maybe it's that underestimation again. Maybe he doesn't think that Lorgar will actually manage to find it.
Yeah, maybe you're right, actually. But even then, like, if your mate comes to you and says, I'm struggling, I'm really struggling, I just don't know what to do, I'm off to do something that's potentially harmful to myself and others, and you say, okay, don't do that. Like, would you ever just leave it as that? Would you not even? Maybe not. Like, so Magnus is there. Maybe Magnus can't get there, but there must be another brother who Lorgar could talk to. Like, okay, most of them do look down on him a little bit, but there must be someone else that you could say, even if it's not the Emperor, and just say, look, someone just go and visit him. Like, he's had the telling off. Now he needs the arm round the shoulder. But what he gets is, don't whine, grow up. Oh yeah, by the way, we almost voted to kill you off, but don't go and look too hard for something else. Like, at that point, yeah, fair play, Lorgar, do whatever you're going to do, because as far as it looks from the outside, no one gives a damn about you. It is a thing. It is that was probably the saddest bit for me, actually. I was like, yeah, at this point, like, for the one bit, because I actually think, like, for a lot of it, the word bearers just, like, they were looking for something to believe in, but to the point that they didn't care what it was, just so long as it had power, and what drove them was their faith, and then their need to fulfill that faith, and they never kind of looked around that. But when you're faced with this, like, no one's giving you any support or an alternative, then you kind of start to understand why.
I think there's a difference between needing something that I don't think Lorgar's doing it, for want of power. It's just that he needs something greater than himself. I think what he really wants is meaning. Yeah. Like, because he's got that whole, like, that sort of conflict of character. He's never thought of himself as a soldier, as a general, even though, he leads a crusade that, takes over his entire homeworld, and that's fairly standard for most of the Primarchs. But he still managed it when others didn't, and he's a competent tactician. He's a great mind. He's this orator who can bring worlds to their knees just by speaking to their passions, and at the same time he wants to be this archpriest, this redeemer and this savior of the human soul. And I think it's that desperate need for meaning, and you kind of get the same thing from Argyle Tal as well. He's trying to do the best he can, but what he really wants is like, what is my purpose here for my legion, for my the people that I care about, for my Primarch, versus what have I become?
Yeah, that's probably fair. Yeah, absolutely. The one flaw in that is that there seems to be little care who that being is or what those beings are that then are the subject of that faith. But we one of the other features of this book, as we get into the pilgrimage and finding the Eye of Terror and going into it, is this concept of free will. And I went back and listened to the interview I did with Aaron and John French a while ago on this, and free will was a big thing that they were talking about on that, in terms of Rogel Dawn in Praetorian of Dawn saying that he can mix up his fighting styles, and John French basically saying, but can he? Because is he maybe built one way, and he understands the concepts of fighting another way, but can't ever bring himself to do it because that's not who he is. Can Lorgar change? Is this built into him? Did he even have an opportunity to not need that faith in something? We don't know. That's an aspect of the Primarchs and the Space Marines that we don't know how much built into them that is. What Ingerthel ends up telling us is there's a genetic predisposition to believing and following their father for the Legion. So there's a suggestion there that the Legion don't have as much opportunity to go a different path.
I think the opinion I've always had, and it's very much kind of like headcanon informed by stuff that's happened, is when you look at something like the Theogonies parts of Angel Exterminatus, the little bits that are like, Fulgrim's origin story, essentially, Ferris's, and all that. In that, when Fulgrim first materializes on Chemos, he's, like you often see Magnus, it's, eyes, wheels, fire, wings, all that sort of thing. And then he, coalesces, and what he coalesces into matches the sort of book that one of the Chemosians has. It's like, the Waterbringer, the perfect son, the beautiful, idealized thing. So I've always felt that, there was a degree of attunement when a Primarch arrives on his homeworld. And that's why they're so, it's not just that they were raised in that culture, it's that they actually sort of reflect the soul of that world. And then you look at kind of the curdled soul of Colchis, I suppose, and it's like, it was a world where they talk about at one point that religion was in the air.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you're so bound to a world like that, it's like, you're always going to have to believe in something. There's always going to be that part of your soul that is yearning. Yeah,
that's definitely an option. The one I've not really considered too much, and that's a big question that will never be answered. All the Primarchs seem to land on worlds that are suited to them. Is that because they attune to the world, or is that because there was some force involved that made sure that the Khan went to his planet, and Russ went to Fenris, and Lorgar went to Colchis, and that's something that I'm sure won't ever be fully explained, and that's something I suppose for fans to just argue about for the rest of the time. But yeah, all those possibilities all work, and I suppose depending on which of those possibilities it is, then colours how you view not only the Primarch, but the actions that are taken all around the rest of the heresy as well. And that's one of the beauties of having of the whole 40k universe, to be fair, is there are those unexplainables that allow you to fit the story around how you wish to go with them. So the word bearers go on this pilgrimage, and they find Cadia, which is a nice little note right at the gates of the Eye of Terror. A planet that speak an old form of Colchizian. What's interesting is we have a number of these planets dotted around the world, around the galaxy, found on there. And here we have, if you believe the voices being told, this is the first. This was all part of the plan. Colchis was always Lorgar was always like kind of destined to come here, and Colchis was set up that way, and everything else, which I suppose shows you the grand plans of chaos, if you believe it all, and how long term they're thinking here, and how much of a thorn they knew the Emperor was going to be.
Yeah, you start to see sort of the wheels within wheels that have been turning in the galaxy, which I suppose, depending on how you look at it, it's either like, it's either a grand scheme or it's kind of them just going, yeah, we'll just like throw out a few common details.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. If we seed enough planets, then we'll find someone and we can tell them they were destined. Or, as you say, it was, all laid out and set to be. But even then, that doesn't guarantee everything. We have the rituals on Cadia, and I like the fact it's Cadia. It's a nice little, it's a little tidbit that eventually Cadia gets destroyed and recolonized and everything else and becomes the planet it is, and yet it's important there as the planet that started, like that was the first step on the path really to where they end up, and on our first custodian death as well. As a sacrifice, which seems to pique Erebus' interest later on as well, when they're looking at the possibility of custodian blood being much more potent for sacrifices, which is all very lovely. And all this is done basically as a step way to going into the Eye of Terror, and Argyll Tal and the Serrated Sun are sent in, and we get all the events that occur within the Eye. Yeah, I mean, how do you deal with this, I suppose, is the question. We have visions of the Emperor's laboratories and the making of the Primarchs. And one of the common kind of assumptions is that this is all very true, and Argyll Tal did lower the Gellerfield and allow all the Primarchs to be spirited away, which is an interesting concept. One I don't really buy, but
it's like you said before. There's elements of truth and lies in there. Like, it's clearly, if not the same actual moment of time, it's the same sort of construct that's being used to show Horus, because I think it's Zephyr. It's like, I could swear that Horus was there.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, I felt it's the Primarch.
Yeah.
It's like, how real is it?
Yeah. It's one of those things, and as you say, like there's no hard and fast rule here. But what we have is we have a demon in a part of space that is warp infused, telling stories and putting across information designed to get these people on board. So no matter what happens, that always has to be borne in mind. Even if you come to the conclusion that you believe it, that just has to be in the back of your head at all points here. The one thing that gets me with all of this is whenever demons offer anything, like Ingethel is... Like, they talk about how disgusting they are, and like everything seems off, and even when they're offering stuff, it's like, just do this, like just lower the Gellerfield on your ship. It's like, but just do it. Just do it. There's nothing ever seems positive. It's always a negative. It's always, well, the Emperor abandoned you. Yeah, but don't tell me why I shouldn't worship him. Tell me why I should worship you. And apart from power, there's always very little, isn't there?
Mm.
It's always the negative emotions. It's always like revenge and power and those kind of things. So I do think that's a factor there that can't be looked beyond. But we have,
No, absolutely.
but we end up having Argotal kind of almost like he's got no choice. Like he's been sent in by Lorgar to investigate, and essentially without the Emperor and the Imperium as their kind of focus, like what other choices do they have? Like if they're searching out there, they kind of have to push the barriers at all times. And so you get Argotal here, who's, as I say, he's pretty well centered, I think, through this whole thing. And he's like, no, I'm not going to fall for that. No, get away from. No, don't do this. No, okay, right, I understand that. I believe that. But then he gets to this point a couple of times where he's like, well, I have no choice now. Like, if I don't accept this next step, then where do I go? What do I do? And so he kind of reluctantly takes those. You know, even if he doesn't feel like it's reluctantly, it's like, well, the only path open to me is this. And so
there's only so much you can do within that sort of cage of duty, and you know the responsibility that you have to Lorgar. It's like, go find me the truth, no matter what it is, whatever you have to do.
Yeah, and within that, because I love the way that we jumped forward to them basically coming out to right at the end of this, and then we get this. Argotal relaying it to Lorgar, which again allows for Lorgar to interject and allows the story to not just be a tale of what exactly happened, but allows for more nuances involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
But all the time Argotal's questioning, because he's been told, like, you've been genetically predisposed to loyalty towards your Primarch. So even then he's questioning it.
Yeah, like how much of this is again your own free will.
Yeah. And again, I think there's a little bit of like, well, does it matter at the end of the day? Because that's still who you are. Even if that's built into you, that is still part of you. And is that any different from me getting my stubbornness from my father? Not really, is it? You know, it's a strange element to deal with. And we get this, I suppose. So everything that happens in that warp, I mean, they end up eating all their crew and other Space Marines. And coming out of it with these two souls, and Lorgar seeing it enough there to know that it's something greater than him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's key. I think it's that there is something here that is worthy of being seen as being greater, and therefore it's worthy of him to follow. But I felt like that was and this is my views on Lorgar, I suppose. I feel that's a cop out. I feel it's finally I found something that is worthy of me to believing, whether I want to believing it. Almost, it's there
because you're seeing something transcendental, but you're not interested in the why or the how until afterwards, when you're like, well, you know, it's kind of powered by atrocity and all of our worst instincts, and you know, but it's like that's how divinity is, apparently.
Yeah, it's a very.
And obviously, you sort of bait the hook with, oh yeah, the Eldar fell, but that's because he would never accept being, you know, gloriously bonded beings like you guys will.
Yeah, and even when he's talking to Argotal, he's searching, he's pushing for, you know, what is it about them? Why? How? And that is quite sad. I feel that is the sad side of Lorgar, is that just as long as something was enough, it would be fine. But hey, you know, that's how you have to have the heresy, I suppose. Yeah. Someone has to fall in that respect. I don't. It's actually quite. So this is like a quarter of the book, maybe a third of the book. This section, and it's brilliant but almost I find it hard to talk about in terms of like there's a lot going on there, but it's all so well written, but it's also so like interlinked with each other all the time, and there are parts of it where nothing obvious, like there's not much action going on for stars, which is I'm perfectly fine with, but when you come to talk about it like this, it's all quite intricate and detailed and connected, and that's what makes it really good, I think.
Yeah.
Great.
It takes the time to sort of establish that level of depth and commitment. You spend so long sort of getting to know Argyle, especially through like the trials and travails, and it's like it takes the time to make you care.
Yeah.
So you essentially have this really incredibly likable, relatable character, even for an Astartes, and then just like starts to slowly put him through the ringer, and you're not sure whether you're following on because you believe what he believes in, but you're there because you care about him personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aaron shows the fight within him. Like, he wants to be that honourable space marine. Like that hasn't changed at any point in this. He still wants to be him, and he believes he does things fairly well and the right way. But now he's got a demon in him, and that's a little bit confusing. And he can also see like the path, say the chaplain's taking, or something. They're almost a separate part of the Legion, and then you've got the whole thing with Erebus as well, who we find out later that like he would have killed him like last time they met if he could, and he still would have killed him last time he met. But he has his place, and they're doing something different now, and he's doing something different now. But they've got this commonality of being betrayed by the Emperor, and having a goal to work towards. Aaron does that all very well, and you explained it much better than I did, which is really good. But Argyle a wonderful character for that, and that's why he's so loved. Universally loved as well. I don't know anyone who doesn't really love him. And then we then get to the final stage, which is Isfan. And there's not too much subtlety in the fight at Isfan, except for maybe a little bit of Korax versus Lorgar, which is wonderful. Yeah.
With Isfan, sort of talk about subtlety, it's when the Raven Guard start to come back.
Yeah.
And there's like I think it's a sergeant or a captain, or I can never remember his name. It's like Torvasian or something like that. And he's like, yeah, it's great. Korax doesn't want to hog all the victory. Come on, get into the fight, guys. They're almost broken. Glory to the word bearers, not trying. And it's, Argyle just says, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And he's like, what? And then it's like, all word bearers open fire. And it's just such a moment.
Yeah.
All the stuff that happens after that, and, the spectacle, you're just kind of like.
Yeah. We have, bearing in mind it's the Argyle depression, bearing in mind, we've seen individual brother betrayals done quite well, but this was like in the middle of the biggest fight that we see up until the siege, pretty much. This is that moment of true like the first time the Wordbearers outwardly show their heresy, and it hurts Argyle. It hurts them all a little bit, although they're eager to get payback. But and then we see the rage of Korax on Lorgar, and Lorgar's already become something slightly different. Like he's standing up to that, and what I really like actually, because it would be very easy just to write 40 odd pages about Isfan and just big story, rah, cool. But what we get is the view back to the Custodes, who are still on the ships because they've been convinced that they have to repel borders. And this remembrancer who suddenly happens upon like everything not being right, and the Custodes trying to take steps to to do what they can to resolve this heresy on the ship, which involves killing Cyrene, but ends up with this showdown between Argel Tal and Aquilon. And it's done so well because it's been like there's been the little caged fighting matches beforehand. Like I always misremembered it. So when Argel Tal was weak, he was being knocked down in 4 or 5 seconds. But even when he was on full form, like he would last a minute and a half against Aquilon. He would be put down, and then just before Isfan, he's basically told you're going to have to deal with Aquilon and his dudes, and he goes into the sparring cage and straps on a couple of lightning claws and knocks Aquilon to the floor within seconds, and then gets beaten up the second time. But there's that first kind of, wow, there's some power here. Like what we've joined in with is some serious business.
Mm.
And then we sorry,
like,
no, you go.
Even Aquilon is like, something has changed.
Yeah.
Like afterwards, the other ones, but you're like, at the same time, it's because there is a genuine affection between them.
Yeah, and
you know that it would hurt for him to do it, so you kind of feel like it's a dry run. It's like, if I can hold my own, then it'll have to be done. But if he takes me down again, then maybe that would be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then when we get to the end, we get these 3 custodians lined up for whatever it is, Aquilon and his 3, whoever, and a bunch of dudes. And there's no, of course, the custodians are never going to back down. They're pointing out truths, but by this point, the word bearers are fully on board. Right? Even Argel Tal, he's on board with what he is.
I've always liked that speech at the end when he sort of like snaps at them. The whole thing like, we were never human.
Yeah. Yes. And there's that's quite a nice little spot actually. By Aaron there in terms of, I think we forget as readers, we're like, oh yeah, Space Marines, awesome, we look up to Space Marines. It's like, well, they're nothing like humans, like, and this is something that right from the moment they start getting implanted, they're boys, and then they become these other things, and it's easy for us to forget they're not just humans in this massive armor with all this supreme training. It's like they are not human. And now they've got this different task and everything else, and they're squared off, and even then the custodies are holding their own. Like, they're against what is, what are powerful, extremely powerful beings. The Galvor back are something else. And yet it will still take a number of them to bring down a custodian. And actually, I quite like that it's not all shown to you in that respect as well. There's quite a lot left there to the imagination.
Yeah, it's more impressions than actual set pieces.
Yeah, very well done. And it's weird. So looking back on this book, I was like, I always remember that bit as being on Isfan for stars. For some, it's amazing how your mind plays tricks with you. But like 3/4 of this book is that build up to that. It's a great exploration of the character of the word bearers, about what is the value of faith, in terms of it's not just having faith, it's where you put it and how you use it, and all that, and as a setup to the rest of the heresy. Bearing in mind this is book 16 or something, maybe more. I can't even remember what book it is.
14,
around there. So we're a fair way in. Like, some big secrets have been revealed, particularly with Legion having come out and things like that. It does a great job of fitting into the heresy, revealing a lot and adding more to the ongoing story of the heresy, I think.
Definitely, it's not an easy thing to do, that far into a series where, as you say, we've already had some big revelations. We've had some big set pieces. We've had like 1,000 Suns and things like that. But I think it's kind of a turning point. Because I mean, after that, you've got books like, Prospero Burns. You've got No Fear. You have these books that do something very similar to what the First Heretic does. Obviously it just like pushes you right into the middle of the Legion, of its culture and its evolution. Prospero Burns kind of does the same thing with the Space Wolves through dumps you in at the deep end and lets you just sort of marinate in how they are. And it's like people love the First Heretic for taking all that time. And I think it's probably because it sets itself up, 43 years in advance.
Yeah.
But then, as you were saying, two-thirds of this book are set up for, the confrontation.
Yeah.
Whereas people had the same problem with Prospero Burns because they felt misled that it wasn't just a retreading of the events. And it's like, Prospero Burns is important because it's the breakdown of why it happens in the same way that the First Heretic does that for the entire heresy. It's why does Lorgar turn? Why does the Legion fall? Why are we here at the end?
Yeah. I think there's a definite... one of the major aspects of that is expectation, and the title of Prospero Burns is possibly not the title that needed to be put on that book, especially bearing in mind we had half the story with Thousand Suns beforehand. So people were thinking, oh, well, we know why the Thousand Suns got done, so we'll just move on from there. I suppose some people may have thought that the Space Wolves story was going to be far more simple than it was as well. But I think a lot of people were excited for the word bearers because of the nature of them falling first to see what had happened. I think that because I love Prospero Burns, I think this and Prospero Burns are extremely well written books, and I think this kind of book, well written, is amazing. Less well written, you're going to lose a lot more than you would in another style of book. Right, there's that bigger jump between the two, but luckily Dan and then Aaron writing these two, right, solid ground I think is the term.
Absolutely.
But anything else you think we need to add on First Heretic?
I was thinking towards the end, the very end. It's like. That is actually the last line, isn't it? When Rome is like, I'm your brother.
Yes.
Because he's like, I've lost everything. But it is, when you sort of break it down, it's all informed by Argyltal's bonds of brotherhood and other bonds, but you watch him sort of slip away from like Zaphen and from what the chaplains are becoming. And you see, he sort of, as much as he's going to betray it, and he knows that one day he's going to have to deal with it, he cherishes that bond with Aquilon.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
But at the same time, he also leans into the strength of his bond with the demon, and it's these conflicting loyalties and knowing that you're embracing something and someone that you shouldn't necessarily.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's born through within the legions, through the lodges as well, the breakdown of that brotherhood and the recreating of a new brotherhood, and just shows one of the major strengths of the Space Marines is that brotherhood that they have. And as you're right, first off they break their brotherhood with the Ultramarines, then basically the whole Imperium, and then within the Legion it breaks down as well. And as you say, so Argyltal then has this new confidant who's this demon within himself, and then we see that. I think we see that played out further down the line when you get to things like No Fear, like where it's easy to see from here, like the 40k Chaos Space Marines whose all their alliances are thinly kept together, because at every stage their brotherhoods are broken down, and you can see that start to happen, and you can see why chaos falls in upon itself every now and then as well. But yeah, all the way through. Yeah, fantastic book. Really enjoyed rereading it, actually, or listening to it as I did.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it's amazing as well. Like, I've read a lot of books, and my memory for what happens where sometimes is not as good as some people's, Mark. But it's always nice to go back and dive into something, and it's always great to read Aaron as well. To be fair, yeah, you can't argue on that one. Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining me.
Thanks very much for having me.
Maybe we'll do another one of these at some point. There's I think there's a lot of value in going and looking back, not just to read good fun books, but just to reacquaint yourself with bits and pieces. Although it can be dangerous if you're about to start a new Legion or anything like that, of course.
That's very true.
Awesome. Cheers, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Well, you've made it to the end of another episode of the Imperial Truth. Thank you very much. This is the second time trying to record this. Magnus is still intent on making his voice heard, so forgive the ginger one for his wailings in the background. Before we go, I do want to talk about the Nova Open charity raffle. Has just opened. One advantage of recording very, very late, I suppose. And there are a handful of 30k specific items on there, but lots of other cool items you should go and look at as well. What have we got here? We've got the honoured Warhammer 30k Zone Mortalis Ultramarines Force. The video started in the background. I do apologise for that. In fact, it won't stop. So, apologies for that. $8 a ticket. So go and look at that. You can find these on novaopenfoundation.org. And they've got various under the raffles. They've got armies, specials, units, and models. So obviously you can find that one under models. $8 a ticket for that one, which is not bad, really. There is also a Warbringer Nemesis, which is a full-size 30k Warbringer Nemesis of Legio Praesagius. It's fantastic. It really is. I'm just having a little look at it now. Lots of marbling on the head and stuff. And LEDs, by the looks of it, all built in. Again, $8 a ticket for that one. Absolutely fantastic. And then there is also, what have we got here? We've got Fulgrim. There's a Fulgrim in $5 a ticket in the single models section. And there were some others as well. I will find them. There's a Legion Praetor, that's right. A White Scars Legion Praetor that's also $5 a ticket. And it looks fantastic. But on top of all that, there's a lot of other 40k and Age of Sigmar and some other games as well. A few armies that you could win if you do play other games. What have we got here? Primaris, Blood Angels, a Free Blades one. I don't know what that is. A Kill Team, Death Guard Kill Team, a superhero set for Crisis Protocol. Well, there's an Aeronautica Imperialis Imperial and Tau box set. And then there is this is $8 a ticket. This is classic Dave Taylor Ultramarines army. And it is quite splendiferous. Dave Taylor is a well-known name around the circuit. And he's got some fantastic models in there. All been, it's all going to be rebased onto 32 mils as well. So it's about 200 models for the original classic squat Space Marines. So if you are interested in any of that, or you just want to donate some money to charity, then head over to the Nova Foundation. I'm going to put the link in the show notes anyway, but you can just Google Nova Charity Raffle and it will come up with that. They end on September the 6th, so you've got a little bit of time to go and purchase your tickets and hopefully win a really cool army. And I think they ship around the world as well. That's like you always used to. And obviously with Nova not being on as well, the charities are going to suffer a little bit from that because they are a charitable organisation in themselves. Although I know a number of people have given extra money back in, and on that note, I do want to say a massive thank you for Dewey, who gave me an upgrade on my Nova ticket. Obviously, I'm not going. I decided to keep a fair chunk of that money with Nova, but some of it will be going towards my Adepticon trip. I pulled some of my money back out, and also some of that money will be going to support some of the charities that helped us around the time we had Jackson, and all the support we received then as well. So splitting it up amongst those things. On that note, we are going to be doing some fundraising for the charities that helped Emma and myself around that time. There's 3 or 4 really. We need to narrow it down exactly, but various people have helped us, and when we do the charity, we'll talk about all the ways that they helped us. And I've had some people offering some support. We just need to work out exactly what we're going to do in terms of fundraising, but it'll probably be some forms of raffle. There might be more than one, because we want to raise some good money for those really good causes that you never want to have to use, but they're there when you do. But that's it for another show. As I said right at the start, there was some rambly stuff going on there as usual from me. Maybe please tell me what you thought of it, and indeed of the review of the First Heretic, and how that went for you. Greg at theimperialtruth.com is the best place to send any of that info. You can also get us on the Facebook page, and Imperial_Truth on Twitter, or at Child of Fang on Twitter or Instagram, or any of that. If you are into Adeptus Titanicus, of course, we have the Full Stride podcast, where we have some fancy Titanicus chat with Matt Woodsmith, my more than capable co-host over there. But I think I've waffled on. As I say, my voice is struggling a little bit, so we'll leave it there. We'll come back hopefully a little bit closer to the planned time for next episode. And as I say, hopefully we're going to get a Sons of Heresy episode out for you as well. But until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.